Welcome to this webinar, Drive Efficient End-to-End Regulatory Compliance Management with OpenPages with Watson. My name is Peter de Geus from IBM. From IBM, we believe that we can enrich your governance, risk and compliance processes with three aspects. Embed structured and unstructured data changes into your GRC processes, leveraging artificial intelligence. Incorporate self-learning capabilities into the impact analysis of these changes into your GRC processes via machine learning. And increase the value-add activities of your risk and compliance teams by introducing a platform for governance, risk and compliance management. This will result in gaining efficiencies within your processes, gain time, being more in control of the risk and governance and compliance processes, gain control, and gain confidence into the results of these processes. So are we in control? So today we will have a webinar that will break down in three parts. So first, Matt Ironside from Swiss Re will introduce and explain how Swiss Re handles regulatory intelligence, compliance management, and embed that into their organization via the IT framework that they defined, leveraging the OpenPages platform. Second, Mehdi Sharif, my colleague, IBM colleague, will explain how OpenPages as part of the RegTech portfolio can support our customers with regulatory compliance management and how this is positioned in the market. And third, Thomas Alderson-Baas from Bowmen Group will explain how they implemented OpenPages at our customers and how they embed AI and machine learning capabilities with Watson Auto AI and Watson Machine Learning in order to enrich your governance, risk and compliance processes. I will now hand over to Matt Ironside from Swiss Re.
So, thank you very much, Peter, and hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Matt Ironside. I am part of Swiss Re's IT Governance Office, and in this session, I'm going to give you a little insight into what we are doing regarding regulatory compliance and also how the OpenPages RCM tool is supporting us with our compliance objectives. But first, just maybe start with a brief overview, some context on who we are, Swiss Re, and the Re in Swiss Re stands for reinsurance. And essentially, we provide coverage to other insurance companies who like to share their risk with us. And we are one of the world's leading players in the reinsurance market. We also do insurance services directly ourselves. So we have a corporate solutions business that provides such services to large and mid-sized corporations globally. And we have an iptiQ business, which is built around developing partnerships, for example, with other insurance companies, where we provide the products, the data, the technology for those partners for them to do their business with end consumers. You can see that Swiss Re has been around a little while, so founded in 1863 in Zurich, Switzerland. And just from the numbers, you see that we have a global presence, so just over 13,000 staff spread across 29 countries. And just from a financials perspective, revenue-wise, we're a $40 billion US dollar organization. And as you can imagine, the vast majority of that revenue comes from the premiums we earn from the reinsurance and the insurance activities. Okay, let's give some context about regulatory compliance and what we're doing in Swiss Re. So if, like Swiss Re, you work in a company that not only has to comply with government laws, but also the different supervisory authorities that exist in the different jurisdictions, you will for sure know that the last decade or so has seen a substantial increase in the volume of regulations. And if we hear what the analysts and the consultants are telling us, there's no expectation that this pace of regulatory change is going to slow down in the near future. So with that background context in mind, Swiss Re started to look at what it was doing regulatory compliance wise and decided that there were improvements to be made in its overall approach to how it dealt with, particularly, based on the different jurisdictions and the different business units that are affected by regulatory compliance in the Swiss Re world. So as a result of that, we came up with a framework, and we've called it Regulatory Intelligence and Compliance Management. We call that RIC-M for short. And essentially, it's our way of trying to standardize our regulatory compliance approach, as I said, across the different jurisdictions and business units. It's made up of two core components. So there's the regulatory intelligence piece and the regulatory compliance management piece. In the regulatory intelligence part, that's very much the front end of the process. This is all about scanning the regulatory landscape. It's about understanding what regulations are out there, what changes, what consultations, etc., etc. And ultimately, it's then about what impacts on Swiss Re. This set of activities are typically done by our colleagues in our legal, compliance, regulatory risk functions. And ultimately, the output of these are which regulations directly impact on Swiss Re. And for those that do directly impact, that's when the regulatory compliance management piece comes in. And it's fair to say that with our RIC-M journey, which we started the implementation at the beginning of this year in 2021, this is where we focused most of our efforts to date in our journey towards bringing in the RIC-M framework. So what have we done? We have defined standardized roles and responsibilities. So you can see here, we've got assessors and reviewers. These are the subject matter experts who, based on the subject matter of the particular regulation, they are required to assess our compliance levels against said clause or article. A coordinator role, treat it almost as if it's like a project manager. Treat the regulation assessment as a project. Your coordinator is there to make sure that that assessment happens, that the assessors and the reviewers are doing their job, that they're doing it in the right time, to the right quality. That's the role of the coordinator. And then the dispatcher is another level up. Maybe, if you like, it's the program manager. So the dispatcher has the oversight of the assessments that are being done based on a particular regulatory topic. And the best way I can explain this is, in Swiss Re's IT governance office, we are the dispatchers of any regulatory assessment that needs to be done where the regulation has a strong IT component to it. Now, beyond the roles and responsibilities, the framework, it has a common process backbone. And then this is where the OpenPages regulatory compliance management tool, the RCM tool, comes into play to support our process and to support that role definition. So let's just dig a little bit deeper then about the tool. So when Swiss Re started looking at tools, these were our two overarching objectives, requirements. We want something that helps us to optimize our time when we're doing the assessments. And equally, we want something that helps us to promote a consistent approach to produce consistent results of a consistent quality. So those are our overarching objectives. And then within those objectives, there were then specific things we were looking for. So just working from the right-hand side, top right-hand side, I mean, of course, a workflow. A workflow helps to drive a consistent process, a consistent approach. Mappings. So the actual to automate the mapping process, of course, one helps to save time. And when I talk about mappings for Swiss Re, we want to map, in terms of our evidences, we want to map our controls, our policies, any other evidences we want to map against a particular clause, article, obligation. And of course, over time with these mappings, that should also help to not only save time, but it should also, again, bring in a consistent approach. Whilst our focus in the short term is very much on the external regulations, we also appreciate that there are other things that we can benchmark against or that we can map evidences against. So the fact that we can then scale up to cover other requirements. So, for example, there an external best practice maybe we want to do a mapping against ISO 27000 requirements, information security. And there's many other frameworks within Swiss Re that we could also map and benchmark against. Results, it's all about the results, isn't it? So when you think about an assessment, there's always an element of subjectivity in coming up with your results. So the idea of having your information transparent, visible, hopes to reduce that reliance on subjectivity and brings in a more objective base. You see the evidences that are being recorded against the particular requirements. You can check and challenge. Likewise, I'm sure for many of you, you know, Swiss Re, with the different jurisdictions, you have similar topics. Our classic one that we talk about is cybersecurity. There are many supervisory bodies that have a cybersecurity regulation. Now, they're all very similar in nature, but if these are across different jurisdictions, it's difficult to compare the results of one jurisdiction on one cybersecurity regulation to another. Well, now it's all transparent, and you start to see the synergies of how you can bring those different jurisdictions together. I've talked about evidences. Of course, evidence is absolutely a must in the assurance world. So the fact that evidences are there, you've got the history, you've got the audit trails, extremely important. But I think it's going to become even more important if you look to the future, because regulators are no longer just asking the yes/no question of are you compliant. Regulators are starting to ask for supporting information. So to have that to hand readily in a timely manner that you can give it to the regulator, that's going to play a more significant part in the future. And then for me, being from an IT governance perspective, you know, a governance role, oversight is king. You know, to be able to know your compliance position at any point in time, whether it's global level, regional level, local level, is extremely important. And to me, having all that information in one place really helps to save a lot of time to get those consolidated positions. So let's just probe a little bit further in terms of the mechanics and the construct. So I'm going to focus just a bit now on the actual assessment. Again, we're talking the nuts and bolts here, doing a compliance assessment. So you'll have a regulation, and when you plug that into the OpenPages tool, we talk about compliance themes. So I'll give you an example. A compliance theme for us could be New York State Department of Financial Services, cybersecurity regulation. One of the first decision points when you talk about regulation is what's in scope. Now, remember, we have to report back to the regulators based on a legal entity. So knowing which legal entities are within scope of your assessment, your theme, is extremely important. So you map to your legal entities. Then, of course, based on the topic of your regulation, you need to know who are going to be your subject matter experts, who is going to be involved in doing the assessment. So you assign your assessors and reviewers. The workflow kicks in, the assessors know that they've got tasks, and now we get to the real detail, actually performing the assessment. And the assessment is about understanding what's the particular clause requirement is and demonstrating what evidences you have to demonstrate compliance. So for us in Swiss Re, we look at our group controls based on what's in our internal control system. We can have evidences which are our policies and standards, so sourced from our policy landscape. But of course, if you're talking a specific legal entity in a specific jurisdiction, you may have local stuff, may not all be group related stuff. So the ability then to bring in local controls, local procedures is also important. And of course, there are always those clauses where there may be nothing that's directly mapped in terms of controls or policies, but it's other pieces of evidence that you need to bring in. So again, you need the flexibility to bring in different types of evidences. And at the end of the day, the assessor does the assessment, the workflow then, the reviewer then reviews, makes comments, etc. The coordinator role is involved. So you use the workflow to get to the end of the assessment process. And of course, you get to your end deliverable, which is your compliance statement detailing your results. So There you go. That's in a nutshell how the construct is. But to do that, you also need some underlying data in there. So I know it sounds obvious, but if you're going to be assessing against the regulation, it's probably a good idea that you've got regulatory content in there. So whatever the regulation is in there, you need to break it down to the right level of detail, which is typically you need the lowest level of detail. You think of some of the regulations out there. There are many clauses, hundreds of clauses, and you need to assess against each one individually. So to bring that in, to be able to do your assessment, to map to your evidences, you need that data in the tool. You need other underlying information, other underlying data there. So if you want to map to your legal entities, which really you should be doing, you need the business entity structure in there. If you want to be mapping to your controls and your policies, you need your libraries in there. Now, just as an aside, from a Swiss Re perspective, we also use OpenPages ORM module, which we use for our operational risk management activities. So the advantage for us is that we are able to utilize the business entity structure data and the risk and controls data that already sits in our ORM system, and we are able to transfer that over into the RCM tool. And that's particularly handy because there's very little data validation, manipulation required, because obviously it's all sitting under the same OpenPages database sort of construct. One final thing I'd like to show you, and that's our plans for our RICM framework. So when we did our business case last year, we implemented RICM at the start of this year, Q1 2021. We did our business case also based on a roadmap that considered 3 dimensions, and you see them there. The coverage of the different regulatory topics, the coverage across where Swiss Re operates, and then finally the user base of the RCM tool. So these were the 3 dimensions we were thinking about. Now, when we first started, our motto was very much start small, keep it simple. So you see here right at the beginning, the regulatory topics, we focus purely on topics which were IT driven. We covered only a small subset of our territories, and you can see there that the user base was very small, a core set of users. And you can see throughout the year, so where we currently are at the moment, we are expanding across other Swiss Re territories, but still focusing on IT related topics. And we're starting to bring in other select users who are relevant to the topics being covered. The whole idea here is we really want to create a solid foundation before we then start to bring on board the wider business area. So, the framework itself, the use of the roles and responsibilities, the core backbone, this is something new and it needs refining, it needs maturing. Of course, the tool to support, it needs further development as you embark on the journey. So this is a very much an exploration, maturity, first level of maturity year for us. And then you see in 2022, we start to onboard the first set of business topics. And of course, we'll have different business users having different requirements. So our framework will adapt. We'll have further developments in the tool. We know that for sure, but it's all built on a solid foundation from what we did in the first year. That's what we expect. And then really from 2023 onwards, we continue the expansion, we continue the growth, we continue the maturity, until we get to that optimal point where we say, right, we've got the right coverage in terms of the regulatory topics, we've got the broad coverage across our Swiss Re countries, and we have the optimal amount of users doing the assessments, doing the coordination, using the management information. We've got the right user base in place in the tool. That is our little journey in a nutshell. I hope you found it worthwhile. It gives you a bit of a feeling of the journey that we're on, the approach that we're taking, and clearly there you can also see where a tool such as the OpenPages RCM can support such an approach. With that, I say thank you, and I'll hand back over to Peter.
Thank you very much, Matt, for this very interesting presentation on how Swiss Re handles regulatory intelligence compliance management within their organization, leveraging the OpenPages platform as such. I took from your presentation 2 points. Actually, start small and keep it simple, and also the journey to grow with the OpenPages platform into a strategic view on regulatory intelligence compliance management. And also very interesting, of course, the 2 cornerstone questions. Are we compliant, and how can we prove that we are compliant? So in order to show the capabilities of the OpenPages platform in more depth, I will introduce my colleague Mehdi Sharif, who will introduce the OpenPages platform as being a part of the RegTech portfolio from IBM, and then more specifically on the regulatory intelligence compliance management module that is part of the OpenPages solution. Mehdi, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Peter, for the introduction. So as you mentioned, what I'm going to focus today is on the IBM OpenPages with Watson platform, which is our governance, risk, and compliance solution that is part of our RegTech portfolio. We have several risk disciplines that we are managing within this solutions, so operational risk, third-party risk, and many others that I'm going to briefly introduce. But the one that I would like to describe or focus on today is really the regulatory compliance management module, and specifically the 2 key capabilities or challenges that we are targeting with this module. So as agenda, what I'm suggesting is really to briefly introduce the platform itself. Then we're going to continue by, with a deep dive on the regulatory compliance management capability. What are the key challenges that we are targeting? 3, the combination of those capabilities with the content that that our partners are providing through our solution, the regulatory content. And 4, the integrations that we've made with the IBM Watson technology, which is our artificial intelligence technology, and what kind of business value those integration can bring to a typical compliance department and their associated activities. So the solution introduction. So the first release of OpenPages has been published in 2003. It was back with SOX for SOX compliance. The idea is really to handle all financial control compliance activities. Since then, we have released a bunch of modules that are targeting specific risk disciplines. You see them here, so digital risk management, business continuity, internal audit, etc. What I want to highlight here is basically we are well known within the market when the company needs to build this integrated risk management view at the group level, at the regional level, so we can combine the outcomes and all the typical activities that those risk disciplines are handling on daily basis in terms of risk assessment, in terms of mapping between different frameworks, and providing dashboards and risk levels or risk exposure to the board. So the platform itself is a combination of 10 modules that you are seeing in the middle of this slide. I'm not going to describe all of them. What I just want to highlight is basically the compliance management modules. So we have one for policy and life cycle. The idea is really to handle the end-to-end process of creating a policy, validating a policy, and then publishing, enforcing the policy within your organization. And the second one is the one that we're going to describe within this presentation, is the regulatory compliance management module, which is actually targeting the different challenges of a company to acquire regulatory content, to be notified when a regulatory change is impacting their organization on each location, on each of their location. And the second challenge that we target with this module, the key challenge, is the constitution or the creation of an obligation library that is qualified internally for the company. So we're going to review those two capabilities as part of the presentation. Just before going into the deep dive of this module, I just want to briefly mention that this solution is coming with a set of connectors, allowing the companies to quickly, actually it's graphically integrate with their internal systems. Either it's for gathering referential data, master data, or to aggregate values from transactional systems. There is from claim systems, custom system, or ticketing system, CM system. The other key capability that is coming with the platform, is fully embedded, is the reporting. So in addition of automating through workflows, business rules, all those activities, we automate the process of reporting the activities through dashboards and reports that any user or manager can subscribe to. Okay, so let's read down into the regulatory compliance management module, and let's briefly introduce the key challenges that we are targeting. So to do so, what I'm displaying here is basically a study that Thomson Reuters made in 2019, and this study was basically focusing on the 10 years of regulatory changes that have been published since the financial crisis. So since 2008 to 2018, what a typical global financial institution had to deal with in terms of regulatory change. And it was basically a study that involved about 900 participants, global institutions that were based on the five main regions of the globe. And the idea was to basically highlight how their activities changed since the financial crisis. And what I don't want to describe all the details and the outcomes of the studies that are very interesting, but the key figure that I'd like to share with the audience here is the average of the daily alerts that a global institution has to deal with. So after this study has been highlighted that a global institution that is operating into the five main regions of the globe has to deal with more than 220 daily alerts. Those alerts can be just guidance, can be regulatory change that are not impacting the company, can be high impacted regulatory change, but at least the company needs to be notified of those regulatory alerts to assess whether those alerts are impacting their product, their organization, and then to define the associated plan. So that provides also traceability on the entire process. And just by highlighting this number, we can definitely assume here, or easily assume here, that there is a room to automate this process, and that managing this volume, this high volume of information with a human members, with a human team, is not something that is efficient enough for a global institution. So this is how we have initiated the regulatory compliance management module. And basically this module is providing a set of capabilities that a typical compliance department will need to automate and to perform within the solution. But what I'd like to highlight is, or what I would like to focus on today, is really the two main capabilities that you are seeing here. So the regulatory library acquisition, so providing the capability to a company to create an obligation library that is qualified and adapted to their organization and their products. And the second one is the regulatory change. So any regulatory change that is notified by one of the regulator, how they can ensure that they're going to be the right team within the organization is going to be notified, and how they can have a monitoring of those activity, ensuring that a regulatory change is well assessed and the appropriate actions are identified and assigned within the organization. To do so, we have partnered with several content providers. So I'm not going to describe again all of them here, but basically the idea is to be able to select one of the regulatory content providers that we have partnered with, depending of your needs and the business requirements, the area of the compliance that you want to focus on. And based on this selection, we can just switch on a connector that will feed the solution with the content that you have selected. So how does it work? In few words, you have on one side you have the regulatory content that is provided by our partners. You switch on this feed according to your needs. So you're going to be able to say, I want you to have all regulations and the associated regulatory events from the European Union Parliament. And as soon as you select, you made your selection within the tool, the tool will feed automatically all the regulatory event associated to your selections. And within the solution, you will be able to build some rules, business rules that will basically highlight if this is a topic related to information security, for instance. I'm going to notify the information security owners within my company. If it's related to data privacy and data protection, same approach. We're gonna map this or assign the regulatory event or the obligation to the appropriate person within your organization. There are several I would say differences between the regulatory content providers that we have within the solution. It depends on your own business requirements, and we are usually assisting the customer on selecting the right regulatory content provider according to their need. Sometimes our customers have already partnered with those regulatory content provider. In that case, we will just connect their subscription to our solution, and then they will consume their regulatory feeds through the governance and risk compliance platform. So let's take a real life example for regulatory change. So here I have a regulatory change, and I need to be notified, and then assign the ownership of this regulatory change, and ensure that the owner will handle the entire process from the impact assessment to the mapping of the controls, the associated policies, etc. So briefly, within the solution, I'm going to connect as a regulatory compliance management owner. So I have a set of capabilities here that I'm looking at, my compliance theme, my regulatory change overview, etc., my policies by departments, etc. What I want to look at here is a regulatory change that is provided by, in that case, in my illustration, by water coolers. So what I see here is the regulatory change itself, the different information coming from water coolers, the documents, the summary of the text. What I see here is that is basically a guidance related to the way that a company should deal with data in the specific pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic situation. So all the data that we are collecting according to this situation, how and how we proceed with those data, and what treatment we should and controls we should design associated to this data. So I can, click on this on the link that will basically describe give me the information of the full information of the guidance here, and I can look at the different guidance and suggested controls that I need to put within my organization. I see that is applicable in European Union, United Kingdom here, and I can drill down and look at basically that how this feed from Watson from water coolers feed is associated to my framework, and that's what I see here. So basically here I see that this feed has automatically generated a regulatory change within my solution. This regulatory change is highlighted here, so I can drill down into this regulatory change directly from there. And here I'm on the regulatory change that I see applicable to my company. So it's still in open status, critical. I have the regulatory change details. So here, back to the text that is provided by Walter Kluwer's, I can deep dive into the Walter Kluwer's notification right from there, and I'll be able here to say that is something that is applicable to that is a regulatory event that is applicable or not applicable to my organization, and then to define the associated impact. Is it going to be high or medium or low, depending on the event itself and the organization within my company. And I can provide some rationale regarding the impact analysis here. Details on the impact assessment here. Same for the comments. I have and I can save my assessment here. I can define my regulatory change activities that are basically going to allow me to handle the changes that will be made within my framework. So I see here that maybe I will need to perform a full impact assessment in the North America retail banking branch. I will need to change my policy to reflect the changes, my data protection policy to reflect the changes of this notification, and I can fully see here the mapping of this regulatory change with my framework. So what are the regulations that are associated to this specific regulatory event? Here I'm saying the two regulatory change tasks that are identified to handle this change. They've been identified by the owner of this regulatory change, and I can see that those regulatory changes are basically going to affect or modify one of my policies within my framework. And when I'm done with the impact assessment and the different tasks that needs to be performed internally, I can simply select within the action workflow here that the impact assessment has been completed, and the task can go to the other activities. Okay, so that's as easy I'm showing it. So you, as an end user, you are notified that the change is occurring. This change is assigned automatically to you thanks to the business rules that you define within the tool, and then you can move forward according to the workflow that is that is designed within the solution. So that is the example for the regulatory change. We can also build the regulatory library within your organization here by creating the right selection through our content providers. and you will be able to have this qualified obligation library within the solution. Last capability that I'd like to highlight here, so is the Watson capability. So Watson is our artificial intelligence capability. It provides a set of skills that are highlighted here. Just briefly, I'd like to introduce what kind of business value it can bring. It can bring to a typical compliance department. So we can translate policies, regulatory content, thanks to translation, automated translation services through Watson. We can have a natural language classifier, so meaning that we will be able to classify your obligation through your risk taxonomies within the solution. The other type of business or capabilities that we will be able to deliver with this solution is basically to proactively by the system, thanks to a natural language understanding, creating labels and assigning labels or tags to your regulatory content, to your control framework. So as what you are seeing here in this short video is basically that the system is suggesting some tags with a confidence score according to the text that is within the control. It can apply to your obligations, to your policies, to your risk framework, etc. And based on those tags that the system will assign automatically, you will be able to look at the relationships between your controls and maybe your business entities, your policies, your obligation, etc. So some associations that the system is suggesting and that has been performed by the end users within the system. So that's just an illustration of what we can provide in terms of artificial intelligence capabilities within the tool, specifically adapted to the compliance, typical compliance activities. So thank you for that's all for me. Thank you for the opportunity to present IBM OpenPages and the compliance module. I give you back the presentation, Peter, for the next sessions.
Thank you, Mehdi, for your presentation regarding OpenPages with Watson and the regulatory compliance management module on our platform. What I find very interesting is to see how we can handle the external information from content providers like Wolters Kluwer and Reuters, embed that in our OpenPages RCM module, and then also assign the tasks and align the subject matter experts to incorporate these changes into our GRC processes and regulatory compliance management framework. The last part of this webinar is related to the implementation of OpenPages, and more specifically on how, from an implementation perspective, AI and machine learning with Watson can be embedded in to enrich your GRC and regulatory intelligence compliance management processes. For that, our business partner Bowmen Group will perform a presentation, and I will hand over now to Thomas and Aldersebaas from the Bowmen Group. Thomas?
All right. Thank you very much, Peter, for the introduction. So today I want to talk about our journey with IBM OpenPages. No, sorry, reverse. Forgot to introduce myself. So thank you very much, Peter, for the introduction. My name is Thomas Aldersebaas, one of the directors of the Bowmen Group, and today I want to talk about our journey with IBM OpenPages and our vision of AI-infused regulatory intelligence compliance with IBM Watson and OpenPages. So let me start by introducing the Bowmen Group. So The Bowmen Group was set up in 2015, formed by IBM OpenPages and RSA Professional Services Consultants. We are currently based in the UK, in the Netherlands, and in India, and have 10 plus years of experience in implementing GRC in large organizations. We have implemented and led many end-to-end projects in various domains across all business lines and operational areas. A typical Bowmen Group senior consultant has significant expertise in working with OpenPages, including but not limited to triggers and helpers, the various solutions that OpenPages has to offer, the full development flow, so design, configuration, workflow management, and deployment, various integrations, and standard and task-focused UI. As our consultants have personally been deployed continuously and full-time on IBM OpenPages implementations for more than 10 years now, Bowmen Group has built up tens of thousands of hours of relevant experience. IBM OpenPages continues to subcontract many of its key reference clients to the Bowmen Group based on our high level of success, customer satisfaction, and customer insistence. So this timeline shows our consultants' history with OpenPages. As you can see, it dates back all the way back to 2006, when OpenPages wasn't yet acquired by IBM. And recently, we have been able to expand our team with experienced consultants to prepare for and fulfill the market demand. In the presentations of Matt and Mehdi, it was underlined what we also experience with our customers. All our customers have to deal with the constant increase in volume and complexity of regulations set forth by governments and supervisory authorities. So, how can we use AI for regulatory change? First, to get additional insights. So, on a GRC platform like OpenPages, a lot of data is collected in a centralized place. So there typically is a lot of information hidden in this big amount of data. To improve decision-making quality and to improve decision-making timeliness. So instead of going to the through the full content to determine a category of a risk or control, we can categorize risks and controls automatically using AI. So that means a shift in the work that we need to do. We automatically get useful information you can already use, and it has the potential to speed up your process. And that also goes hand in hand with the ease of to ease the burden of reviewing all available data. We can also use AI to improve the user's experience. So think of mapping controls to obligations. And we want to move from locking yourself up in a room for a week to do the mapping manually to getting help from AI, where the manual activity is reviewing what has been proposed automatically. And this doesn't only focus on the quantitative values, so the number of controls correctly mapped automatically, but also on the qualitative value. So I don't have to lock myself up in a room for a week anymore to do the mapping. I can spend my time on stuff that I actually want to do rather than stuff that I just need to do as part of my job. So we see this as a toolbox for smaller and bigger use cases, where you can start with the smaller ones and expand over time and mature over time in the use cases that you implement. And I will talk about this in my next slide. So basically, we want to automate things that are difficult to automate in a traditional way. And if I would need to sum this up in a very short sentence, I would say we can use it to support human decision making. So just a small story about how to start using AI. So this is the process that we take for customers that are new to AI and that are interested in actually applying it. So very important is to start with an AI introduction to the stakeholders. What can it do? What are the limitations? To set realistic expectations. To go into the next step, to actually identify use cases by looking at existing workflows and identifying all of the parts of the workflow that potentially can be automated using ML. Then you can sort those use cases that you have identified and plot them on a roadmap based on priority, complexity, and business value. And remember, we want to start small and avoid like a big bang approach, because we need to build trust. So we select an initial use case and build a proof of concept. And if that is a success, we can then integrate and automate, deploy to production, predict and measure the impact. So some of the keywords that I often mention are, we start small. We want to see quick results, which is why we would like to perform a proof of concept first, rather than the customer needing to wait for half a year before it sees anything. Augmented intelligence to support human decision making, and the focus on increasing workforce productivity. And we focus on qualitative and quantitative value. So we actually also want to make the end user happier and support them in their work. And very important, clearly defined success criteria. When do we all think it's a success, rather than let me perform this machine learning use case for you, and I reached a very good accuracy, but it's of no use to the business. So we have identified many use cases for AI within our customer base by looking at their existing workflows and discover parts that can be automated or enhanced with AI. But following on from the previous presentations, and specifically on regulatory intelligence and regulatory alerts, we have recently built and integrated an AI solution predicting the applicability for each piece of regulatory intel. So for this customer, on average, 450 new items per month are received. And then for each item, applicability, relevance, and impact to the organization need to be determined based on the content. As you can see, each item, each regulatory intel item, belongs to one of three categories. So it's regulatory, which means it's applicable to the organization and requires follow-up. It can be informational, in which case it's applicable, but no follow-up is required, or it's not relevant. As you can see, of those 450 new items per month, 35% is actually not relevant in this case. So basically, there can be two ways to determine the type. It can be done manually by going through the content and determining whether it's regulatory information or not relevant, or in this case, the customer has set up some manually managed, defined business rules to try and automate that process. Also, what we see is that if various content providers are used, there might be a difference in the information available for each regulatory intelligence, impacting the complexity of the business rules that you need to set up. So in this case, we tried to replace the manual business rules by AI, and more specifically by using natural language processing and machine learning. So these results are based on those manually managed business rules. And what we saw is a significant decrease in time required to keep the rules up to date. Also, improvement of model or prediction quality over time using AI and machine learning versus equal or a decrease in quality of manual business rules with growing complexity. So over time, it becomes more and more complex and difficult to manage your business rules, simply because there will be much more content, much more new content, more business rules that potentially interact with each other as well. And a nice side effect was the realization that the data quality should be improved. So we had cases where one expert would say that it's regulatory for one piece of intel, where another expert would say it's informational. So this resulted in actually a project to improve the process and formal definitions, because the more good quality data you can provide to the AI system, the better it becomes. Comparing this to setting those types or determining those types manually, then we can basically save hundreds of hours, because then you don't need to scan through each and every piece of intel item by item, which will take, you know, minutes. Rather, we can give you a proposed type in a matter of a split second, basically. So that was in short what I wanted to talk about. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to give the word back to Peter.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your presentation, and interesting to see how you, Bowmen Group, implemented OpenPages at the customer use case that you presented. What I took from your presentation is really the complexity and the load of the regulatory changes and alerts that this organization is confronted with. More than 450 changes per month. And also, I am very interested to learn indeed how you use Watson AI and machine learning to make this process easier and determine the impact on the GRC processes of your customer. Today, we have seen the presentation of Swiss Re, Matt Ironside, how OpenPages, the OpenPages platform, supports Swiss Re in their journey towards full regulatory intelligence compliance management. Mehdi Sharif, my IBM colleague, presented the capabilities of the module regulatory compliance management as part of the OpenPages platform, and Thomas presented the implementation of OpenPages at a customer and how their approach is to infuse AI and machine learning in this process. Finally, I want to share with you some content that's available on the IBM websites. So there's a website, IBM OpenPages with Watson, with a lot of content. I will go to that website shortly. And these are our details. So these are the links, relevant links to the websites. And when you have any questions regarding the presenters, please reach out to Thomas Aldersabaarse from Bowmen Group, my colleague Mehdi Sharif, or myself. And I will now close with the website of IBM. So this is the Watson OpenPages website, and you will find there interesting content regarding a trial that you can do, an interactive demo that you can follow, some additional information regarding the benefits, regarding the use cases of OpenPages, as you can see, client stories, and additional white paper material. I would challenge you to go to this website and to explore the capabilities of IBM OpenPages with Watson. And finally, I would like to thank you for attending this webinar and wish you a nice day. Thank you very much.